Hello and welcome to Pokemon Zoology podcast number 9 with me, Joshua Dunlop, talking about my Pokemon pictures that I've created this month for the Pokemon Zoology series. I hope you guys are alright. Coronavirus has been a bit crazy all over the world as normal, and it just doesn't look like it's letting up. I know things are trying to get back to normal in a lot of countries now. I don't know whether or not how UK is doing. For me, it's kind of feels like it's a bit wish-washy and back and forth, but you know, I work at home anyway, so it's not really the biggest deal. But anyway, I hope you guys are doing all right. So this past month has been just insane, because first of all I hit 220,000 followers on Instagram, which was amazing, blew my mind, and I did a celebration image. Well, so I say celebration image. Usually when I hit a milestone, I'll do one. This time I offered to remake the starter Pokemon. And, the second stage starter Pokemon, technically. And, yeah, people really liked it and wanted me to do it. So I went through and then got another 10,000 followers and hit 230,000 followers. Which, yeah, I was just speechless. I really, really, that doesn't happen every day, and really super blew my mind. So I did another vote, and technically I didn't do a vote. I decided to do the starter Pokemon, like redo the original starter Pokemon, because it didn't seem right that I'd redone the second ones but not the first ones. So I went back and did them, and and then I'd hit the 230,000 and decided I was going to do the final evolutions, Venusaur, Charizard and Blastoise. Now, I've just burnt through so many pictures this month. As I said, I've done Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, Venusaur, Squirtle, Wartortle and Charmander and Charmeleon. Blastoise and Charizard are still on their way. It's going to be a full episode trying to talk through all of these. I was thinking about splitting it up, but it just kind of doesn't flow very well, considering I'm doing this per month. You know, if I get a few more done, it just will seem a bit crazy. So what I'm going to do is try to get through it relatively quickly. I'm not going to kind of like skip over any details, but yeah, I'll try and get through it. So anyway, so moving on, first of all we have Bulbasaur. Obviously Bulbasaur was the Pokemon that I ever did. I actually decided to learn ZBrush and create Bulbasaur years and years and years ago, right back at the beginning. And it was kind of the first one that kind of showed me that, like, oh yeah, you can do this, you can make these, and it doesn't look half bad. So I've always kind of had a soft spot for that. And when I was remaking it, I wanted to kind of keep a lot of those original aspects and design elements that I did for the first one. Mainly because I want it to kind of feel like it's like all still part of the same universe. But I think the one thing that I did change is that taking the head, I moved it a lot more in line with the anime. So I kind of made the eyes bigger, I kind of moved the mouth down. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to keep its cuteness. I kind of wanted to make it look like it was a baby. And I was really happy with it, you know. It took a while to try and like rehash things out and make things work again. But overall, I was really pleased with it. Really loved how it all kind of turned out. There's not really much to sort of say about that one. I just kind of influenced from my original one. Looked a little bit more at the anime and tried to get that in. And I'm really glad that, you know, people really liked it, so I was really happy with that. Then I did Ivysaur. Technically I did Ivysaur first, but yeah, I wanted to kind of give the feel that it was a little bit more adult and kind of like a sub-adult, as it should be. So I kind of had the eyes a little bit smaller, had the teeth a little bit bigger. But one of the main things that I did was just kind of really go in and do a lot more texture on the model. If you remember rightly, like last year, I did a celebration image, I think it was for 210,000, I'm not actually sure, of the 3 starters. And I really loved how that turned out. Genuinely loved it. But the detail, like the really finer details, were lacking a little bit. So what I did is just kind of with the Ivysaur, I just went in and really kind of like pumped up those details and made it a little bit sharper. bit more realistic. And yeah, I was really kind of happy with how it turned out. It really kind of like, I also brought in a lot more of the personality, so it's got a little bit more kind of like aggressive feel to it. But yeah, I really loved how this one turned out. The leaves I thought were great. But yeah, I think it worked really well. And finally, I'm going to talk about Venusaur. Now, technically, I did 2 pictures. I did the first one, which is in a forest. I had a few people come back and say like they felt that the flower and the leaves were a little bit too small and it wasn't as flat and squat and whatnot. Now technically that was actually kind of planned. So like I wanted there to be some like clear sexual dimorphism between the male and the female Venusaur. Like some of the elements I did that I changed from the anime was that I made the legs a bit longer, made it so that the stomach wasn't sort of grating on the floor anymore, lifted the head a little bit, made the eyes smaller. A lot of people said, asked why the eyes were smaller, and this just kind of comes down to how larger animals work in the wild. Generally, if you have far bigger eyes, it implies that the animal itself is a lot smaller. So I just kind of went in and I kind of made the eyes a little bit smaller, which I think gave off the right impression. I made it feel like it was a larger creature, and I had the flower be smaller and stuff like that, and made it kind of a taller creature because I imagined that they would move around a lot more, and especially kind of fighting for females and stuff like that, that they would need kind of a lighter, a kind of a more streamlined feel. And then with the female, I wanted them to be a bit larger, far more squat, like you see more in the anime. Not as much as in the anime, because realistically, like with a lot of Pokemon, if they were like that, anatomically, they just couldn't walk or move. So I've had to change a few things to make sure that it feels more like it could be a living, breathing animal. But yeah, I made the flower much larger on this one. Again, kind of going back to what I was saying about the flower size, a lot of people said, no, the flower's a lot bigger. And actually, if you look at the progression of Venusaur's design over the years, the very early design elements of Venusaur, especially in the anime and the comic books and stuff like that, they have a smaller flower. And it was actually kind of later depictions of them where the flower got a lot larger and the leaves got a lot wider. I'm not saying that, technically neither is wrong, because a lot of Pokemon designs have changed over the years. Pikachu was originally like a round ball, and now it's kind of a little bit more teddy bearish. So they do change and they do adapt. I think with this one, I just kind of wanted to show off how technically you could have a very similar thing with both just through sexual dimorphism and have like a male and a female difference. And I know specifically that Venusaur definitely does have a male and a female difference. They actually have kind of what is described as a seed, but I imagined as a stigma, which is kind of the sexual organ of a flower, and is kind of like the central element of a flower that kind of helps produce pollen and whatnot and attract insects. So that's kind of how I depicted it. But yeah, like, to be honest, even these ones got a little bit of flack. I'm really happy with their designs. I think they're really cool, to be honest. And it's kind of how I've always imagined Venusaur. Mainly because playing the games, I was never a big fan of Venusaur. Big fan of Bulbasaur, big fan of Ivysaur. Not a fan of Venusaur, mainly for, it has bug eyes, it doesn't look like it can walk. It just kind of looked ugly in its design, and it didn't feel like it progressed naturally from the first two that are quite interesting designs. So that's kind of, I wanted to put my 2 cents in, really. And as I said, very, very happy with the result. So talking about Charmander now, again, as I said before, I had taken the model that I did for the other celebration image, and I just kind of went in and did a lot more detail in it, trying to kind of make it a little bit more polished. And there's not really much to say about it. I was just wanted to kind of do it from another angle because the first one was a bit more face on, so I wanted to show kind of its body shape. And compared to like my original Charmander, right from the beginning, I've really kind of took a departure from it and went far more in the direction of the anime. And I'm saying this now, like so many people go like, oh, it's supposed to be a salamander. I'm like, do you know what a salamander looks like? It's a newt. This is a bipedal dinosaur-like creature, so it's gonna look, when it's translated into realistic thing, it's gonna look like a bipedal realistic creature. If you go for a lizard, the design features, its claws, its arms, everything about it is way too thin and spindly, so it doesn't work as a lizard. If you try and make it a salamander, it will look like a hideous monstrosity because salamanders look nothing like Charmanders. They look a lot more like Whoopers, which is exactly what a Whooper is designed after, or a Quagsire. So that doesn't work. The closest thing you say, and you know, it's what I would call a false dragon. It's not a dragon type, but it has a lot of the features of a dragon type. The closest thing you could say is a dinosaur, and that's what I've kind of brought in. Obviously, there's a lot of heightened features in there, but overall, it's a dinosaur. So, you know, everyone can argue their fact, everyone has their own opinion, that's fine. Artistically, that's my opinion, and that's what I've chosen to depict it. I've obviously had to make it more upright to fit the anime, which it feels a lot more like the very early depictions of dinosaurs, especially T-Rex and stuff, where they were upright and dragged their tails and that kind of stuff, which, as we know now, is very inaccurate. But you know, that's kind of one of the things that I've just kind of had to bring in. It feels a little bit awkward, but it is how it is. But yeah, overall I was really happy with it, and I really liked how the eyes turned out. Worked really nicely against the orange, these bright blue kind of sapphire eyes. And yeah, and I put it in this forest and kind of came up with this whole story about people abandoning Charmanders fire type Pokemon in areas where they shouldn't be living, and it causes problems and stuff like that, which is a reflection on invasive species and people releasing exotic pets and stuff like that either you're going to kill them or they're going to cause a huge amount of damage to the ecosystem. Obviously, this is a more literal concept of damage to the ecosystem, considering that it's a fire-type Pokemon and it just causes forest fires. But again, it's a throwback to all of the really tragic things that have been going on this year with the fires in Australia, the Amazon, Antarctica. It's, you know, I think the world is in a very delicate place right now, and I don't think that there's a problem with highlighting that, because as a species we need to do a lot more to save this planet. So yeah, so I like to try and bring in a lot of these sort of important things. Same with like deforestation, poaching, animals on the endangered species list. They're all things that I try and bring into my stories about Pokemon, just to kind of like shed some light on things, especially also like trying to kind of, it's one thing going up to someone and being like, hey, you should try and do things to try and save the planet. It feels quite pressured, and it's kind of hard for people to kind of empathize with. Whereas actually kind of putting it in the context of something like a fan favourite franchise and giving them some context in a different medium can actually make a bit of a difference, and people can kind of absorb it a little bit better. I know that sounds a bit strange, but sometimes that's the best way of doing things. Moving on to Charmeleon. Once again, I made it far more upright than my original picture. I also, one of the biggest changes that I did, and a departure from the anime, is I gave it fingers, which in the anime it doesn't have, which never made sense for me anyway. Well, I just don't think it does. I don't think that when they were designing these things, I don't think they were thinking that far into it. And a lot of the time they designed things and other things were thrown away and things were brought back in, and yeah, it gets confusing. But yeah, so I did that because I just felt that it felt very unnatural just to have kind of these spikes sticking out of its hands, especially evolving from a creature that already had fingers. It's like, why would it evolve and lose some fingers and then evolve again and gain fingers. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. So I've given it fingers to make it a bit more natural. Made its head a lot larger to kind of fit into the slightly more anime style. I still wanted to... There was a lot of stuff that I still kept to make it realistic. So its eyes, for example, I didn't make them kind of cartoony or human. Like, I still kind of wanted to keep those animalistic eyes. I gave it more teeth. Still kept the kind of pronounced top and bottom canines that Charmeleon has, but I gave it a lot more teeth. And it may feel a little bit strange because obviously carnivores, like especially like theropods and dinosaurs like that, their teeth are irregular but not that irregular, so it does feel a bit strange that they're kind of all regular and then you have these large ones, but it's simply to tie it into what the anime has, where it has these 4 fangs. And and also kind of made its feet a little bit more dinosauric. I added in these kind of folds on its feet, and the same with Charmander, which a few people were a little bit confused at, but that it was actually looking at things like emus and ostriches and stuff like that. And they kind of have these folds because when they're moving quite quickly, their feet need to kind of fold backwards, and it gives them a little bit more stretch on their skin. That was just kind of like a design element that I brought in that I just thought looked kind of cool. But yeah, and as I said, I haven't done Charizard yet, still on the list, but I will be getting to it soon. So what I'm going to do is jump to Squirtle. Squirtle, again, I took from the original Celebration image. But what I actually did was took the shell from the original Squirtle. So there's no actual difference from the first Squirtle that I did right back at the beginning. The lighting's a lot different. So the first one I did was underwater. I made it very blue. Technically, like now looking back at it, I can see water isn't that blue. It's only when you kind of once something gets a certain distance away, especially out in the open ocean, that's when that kind of deep blue starts coming in, because you have like light particles bouncing off microorganisms and stuff in the water. But when it's that close to the camera, technically you would actually still be able to see the colours quite well. I'm learning, you know. All of this is a constant learning curve, and I'm really happy with how these have turned out. Like, I've got some really nice high detail elements in there. The eyes of Squirtle look really cute, and that was me looking at baby sea turtles, specifically green turtles, to kind of get the segment. I know I find it very strange, because I understand that when people look at Squirtle, the original, the anime, they're like, oh, that's really cute. And then if you show them a picture of a baby sea turtle, they go, oh, that's really cute. But then if you combine those things and you make Squirtle look like a baby sea turtle, people, they go, oh, that's hideous. Oh, that looks gross. Whereas actually it's kind of looks like a natural sea turtle. One of the things that I'll talk about quickly is that there were a few changes in its design. So for example, sea turtles' nostrils are a lot higher on their head, because when they surface on the water, they need to be able to breathe in really quickly. So they have their nostrils a lot higher, because they are still air-breathing creatures. And but Squirtle, its nostrils are actually quite low, quite close to its mouth, or its beak, I guess. So I've had to move them down. And with the arms, I put these kind of like plated ridges running up. That was actually a combination of sea turtles' fins have quite a lot of these kind of segmented scales, but then I was also looking at things like snapping turtles, which have a lot more irregular, jagged, kind of shaped scales. So I kind of combined both of them so that it was this kind of like ridging in different places and stuff. Rather than being like, this is supposed to look like this species of turtle, it was more like, this is a combination of loads of different species of turtles / tortoise. Especially as, you know, the way that I've kind of seen it is these aren't necessarily reptiles, because when it fully evolves into Blastoise, bear in mind, Blastoise looks very little like a turtle other than the fact that it has a shell. You know, it's got ears and its kind of face is a bit more bear-like and whatnot, and for me it's just like there are definitely mammal traits in there. So it's because of that, I didn't want to kind of like pinpoint anything in particular and be like, these are definitely reptiles, because they change so dramatically as they evolve. But the overall scene, I was really, really chuffed with how it turned out. The rock pool just looked perfect, and the colours worked really nicely, and same with where the light was coming from and everything. It just kind of came together, and I was really, really happy with the Squirtle picture. And finally, moving on to War Turtle. Again, I actually took the original model. This time I actually took the model from my original picture of War Turtle and played with that. Mainly because I quite liked it. I thought it looked really cool. I think maybe my original concept of rendering felt a bit off. It wasn't really kind of working in that respect. But going back into it, I could see where the details needed to be brought in. I could see where like the face shape wasn't working as well. There was a few elements that I kind of wanted to bring in. So I went for a kind of a more inky blue. It came across, I think because of the lighting, it came off a little bit stronger than what a lot of people remember War Turtle to be. But they are kind of like an inky blue. I was happy with the changes that I brought in. I did a little bit of, when I came into Photoshop, I did a little bit more work on the sort of feathered ears and tail, looking at like the swan feathers and kind of using that. And then with the claws, I looked at snapping turtle claws again, and actually brought in some photo elements in there, just to kind of dirty up those claws and whatnot. And what the last thing that I did actually in Photoshop when I was developing this was that its eyebrows were a lot higher, and it was kind of looked a lot happier. And it kind of dawned on me that like War Turtle doesn't look happy. It looks constantly pissed off and has kind of like a real attitude to it. So that was something that I kind of had to go in. So I had to lower the eyebrows in Photoshop and make it look a little bit more personality, which is funny because a few people came back to me and said, oh, it looks a bit too anthropomorphic, is what I was trying to say, and it looks like it's got too much personality and stuff, which in terms of creating a realistic creature, that's very right. It doesn't quite look like that, but I was leaning a little bit more towards the anime here and trying to kind of bring in some more elements on that, because at the end of the day, I am doing this for me, but I'm also doing it for you. And there are elements that are kind of like, if it doesn't really feel like, if I've completely missed the kind of vein of what the original Pokemon is, then I don't think I'm really doing it justice exactly. There are some times that I change it, and I feel like I'm justified doing that because of the realism and stuff like that. But in this case, because it's such an iconic Pokemon, I really wanted to kind of bring in some of that attitude in there. So yeah, so that's kind of what I did. I'm already kind of getting close to the end of where I'm supposed to be on this podcast, because usually I try and keep them around half an hour, but might run over a little bit on this one. So quickly, I'm going to move on to the Q&A session. Our first question comes from Matty P17, and they say, I know this isn't a Pokemon question, but will you ever continue your Prehistorica series? If you don't know what my Prehistorica series is, it's basically where I've kind of created like a Jurassic Park-esque realistic dinosaurs in a kind of a park scenario, without all of the blood and carnage and terrifying things. It's kind of supposed to be depicting a working dinosaur prehistoric park. So yes, to answer the question, yes, I would like to continue it at some point, but right now there's a lot more stuff on my plate. So as a lot of you know, I'm doing the Pangea game, and that's taken up a lot of my time, which is dinosaurs and humans living together, and the team are working really tirelessly, and we're doing the best we can, and it's coming along. But it does take a lot of my time up, and I have to focus on that, make sure things are running, because I'm the creative director on it and also the art director. So yeah, that's a lot of work. And then I've been doing the Fakemon series with the Aquas region, which I've just actually launched an Instagram, Twitter and Facebook page for specifically. I did these because they're easy and they're fun. It's not a lot of pressure for me. I can just have a little bit of a doodle, and sometimes I need that. Everything else kind of has a little, even though it's fun, has a kind of quite a lot of pressure attached to it. And with the fake mon, it's just a bit of fun on the side, and people seem to really like it. So I've been doing that a bit more regularly recently, and then I have some like freelance jobs that come in ever so often, and I do those. So it's all kind of a bit of juggling act, and occasionally some of my projects are kind of have to take a backseat, and doesn't mean that I've given up on them, just means that they're going to be on the shelf for a little bit until I have time to pick them back up again. So sadly, I'm just going to have to say you have to be patient on that one. We've got another question here from Chop for Cheese. Will you turn your fake mon into realistic versions? No. It's a short answer. I have enough of the original Pokemon to worry about, let alone ones I've just randomly made up. So no, you're not going to see any of those, I'm afraid. Sorry. And we've got a final question here from Kaiju Killer. Will you ever do a picture with loads of your Pokemon in? I would love to do those, like have a kind of like a big natural picture. There's a few elements of the reason why I haven't yet, nor I don't think I will do anytime soon. One, I'm not an amazing environments artist. I can do a bit of it, and it's good, kind of, but it's not. I'm not to the same level as some of these amazing artists out there. So that's a challenge in itself, trying to do an entire picture with lots of environmental elements attached to that. Then comes the rendering and making sure that everything fits the world. You have to kind of have all the same lighting and everything like that, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to render like lots of different Pokemon. So I to be honest, I don't see myself doing it anytime soon, realistically. I'd love to, but it's just a lot of work. It's basically saying like I could spend a huge amount of time trying to do a picture with loads of Pokemon in it, or I could use that time to make new Pokemon pictures. So it's kind of that juxtaposition. And I'd rather just keep making new Pokemon, to be honest. But yeah, so I need to wrap up now because I've been talking for way too long. But I just want to say a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters: Bridget D Laurent, Sturla, Sam Simmons, Angela Longstreet, Nikki Wolf, Jamie Dunbar, and Elvis Ditto. Thank you guys all so much, and everybody else who's supporting me on Patreon. Genuinely, it's amazing. Please check out my Patreon, there'll be a link below, and if you want to get any cool prints, then head over to my Etsy store. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening and for following me. It really does mean the world, and hopefully I'll be able to get out Charizard and Blastoise soon, which will be a lot of fun. So yeah, keep your eyes out for that. Talk to you soon. Stay safe, and see you next time.